We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf from Aleph and Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 21a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked, how do we know that a king takes half of the spoils of war and the people take the other half? And the Gemara brings a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. The pasuk says, Vayimshechu LaHashem l'nagid u'letzadok. Rashi says, Vayimshechu oso b'shlomo ksiv. This pasuk is written by Shlomo HaMelech. They anointed him to be a leader, and then it mentions tzadok. And so the Gemara says, Makish nagid letzadok. We compare the leader to tzadok, who was the Kohen Gadol. Ma tzadok mechza lo mechza le'echav. Just like by tzadok, by the Kohen Gadol, he takes half of the lechem upon him, and the other Kohanim, his brothers, they take the other half. Af nagid, so too when it comes to the leader, in this case the king, mechza lo mechza le'echav, he takes half, and then his brothers take half. And the Gemara says, V'tzadok gufei minol, not tzadok himself, how do we know he gets half? The Tanya, because we learned in a Braisa, Rebbe Omer, Rebbe says, V'haisa li'aron u'levanov, it will be for Aaron and his children, mechza li'aron u'mechza levanov. It means half for Aaron and half for his sons. And Rashi explains, V'haisa li'aron u'levanov, b'lechem haponim ksiv. Again, this is written by the lechem haponim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Lo yarbe lo nashim. It says in the pasuk that a king cannot have any wives. Ela shmona esrei, the limit is 18 wives according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Marbehu lo, he is allowed to have many wives. Uvilvad shelo yehu mesiro, says Libo, as long as they don't turn his heart away. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Afilo achas, even if it's just one wife, umesira es liba, but she turns his heart away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hareza lo yisa, and he should not marry her. Imkain, if so, lama ne'emar lo yarba lo nashim, why does it say that he can't have too many wives? The afilo ka Avigail, even a wife like Avigail, meaning even someone righteous, but if he has many, that would be a violation of the prohibition. And the Gemara says, L'meimra de Rabbi Yehuda darish taima dekra. Does this mean to say that Rabbi Yehuda, he's the one that darshans the reason behind the pasuk, because he's saying that the king can have many wives as long as they don't turn away his heart, because the real reason of the pasuk is that they shouldn't turn him away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Rabbi Shimon lo darish taima dekra. Rabbi Shimon is the one that does not darshan the reason behind the pasuk, because Rabbi Shimon is saying lo yarba lo nashim means to say he can't have many wives, no matter how the wives are. But the Gemara says va'ipcha shaminanhu. But we have the exact opposite. We learn the opposite in a Braisa. The Tanya, because we learn in a Braisa, Almona bein shi'aniya, bein shi'ashir, when it comes to a widow, whether she's poor or whether she's wealthy, ein memashkin and also, you're not allowed to take collateral from her. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, lo sachbo beged almona, you can't take again the clothing of the almona. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is saying that it applies across the board. It doesn't matter whether she's poor or wealthy, meaning to say we're not darshaning the reason behind the pasuk. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Ashira, if she's wealthy, memashkin and also, then there's no problem taking collateral from her. But aniya ein memashkin and also, the only problem is to take from a widow who is poor, then you can't take the collateral. Because if you take the collateral from a poor widow, you're going to have to return it to her every single day, and then you're going to give her a bad name among her neighbors. And we say on this machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, we want to understand, what does Rabbi Shimon mean? What exactly is he saying when he says that you can't take collateral and you're going to have to return it to her? This is what Rabbi Shimon is saying. Since you're going to take collateral from her, so you're going to be obligated to return it to her. You're going to return it to her every single day. You'll take the collateral every single day. You'll return the collateral. So then this man is going to be frequent by this widow. She'll get a bad name among her neighbors. And the point is, Alma Rabbi Yehuda lo darish taima dekra. You see that Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't darshan the reason behind the pasuk. The pasuk says lo sachbol beged almana, and it applies to all almanas. It applies to all widows. He doesn't understand that it only applies to the widow who is poor because of the reason behind the pasuk. Rabbi Shimon darish taima dekra, and Rabbi Shimon seems to be the one over here that he is darshaning the reason behind the pasuk. And the Gemara answers, Bialma Rabbi Yehuda lo darish taima dekra. Really, in general, Rabbi Yehuda does not darshan the reason for the pasuk. V'shani ha'acha, but it's different over here when it's talking about a king having many wives, to mefarish taima dekra, because the pasuk actually explains its reason. The pasuk says, Matam lo yarba lo nashim. What's the reason that he can't have many wives? Mishum de lo yasser levava, because his heart, it shouldn't be turned away. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. So over here, where it's giving the reason, we darshan the reason. But in general, according to Rabbi Yehuda, lo darshin and taima dekra. Rabbi Shimon Amar Lachan, Rabbi Shimon will say to you, Michti, let us see, be'alma darshin and taima dekra. On the contrary, in general, we do darshan the reason behind the pasuk. Im kein lichtov kra lo yarba lo nashim v'lishtok. But if that was the case, by the king having many wives, the pasuk should have just written he should not have many wives, and then it should have been silent. V'ano amin, and I would have known on my own. Matam, what's the reason? Lo yarba, that that he can't have many wives, mishum de lo yasser, so that his heart is not turned away. So lo yasser lamali. So if that's the case, why does it need to say lo yasser in the pasuk? Must be afilo achas. It must be that even one wife umesira es libo, and she turns his heart. Harezu lo yisen, he shouldn't marry her, and therefore we understand elamani mekayim lo yarbe. So what am I going to do with the pasuk that says he can't have many wives? The afilo ka Avigail. That means he can't have many wives, even if they are like Avigail. And the Gemara continues, Hani Shmona Esrei Minolan, this limit of 18 that the Mishnah mentioned. Where do we get the number 18 from? Techsib, because it's written in the pasuk, Vayvoldu leDavid banim bechevron, that David had children in Chevron, Vahi bechoro, Amnon lachinoam hayisraelis, umishneu kilov, lavigail eshes naval hakarmeli, v'hashlishi Avshalom ben Macha, v'haravi Adonia ben Chagis, v'chamishi Shefatia ben Avitol, v'hashishi Yisram laegla eshes David, Eile yoldu leDavid bechevron. It lists all of the children of David to the various wives, and there are 6 wives that are listed in the pasuk. The Kamar le Navi, and the Navi says to him, Im ma'at v'osifalach kahena v'chahena, then I'll add for you wives, kahena v'chahena. So we understand that each kahena means another 6 wives. Kahena sheis v'chahena sheis. The first kahena is another 6, then the v'chahena is another 6. That's 6 times 3. Dehavilu tavni, sorry, that comes out to 18 wives. We see a limit of 18 wives by kings. And the Gemara continues, Maskefla Ravina. Ravina asks a question on this. Emo kahena tarti, sorry. Why don't we say that kahena means a total of 12, because you add 6 to the original 6 wives, and then vichahena, when it says vichahena, that means you have to add another 12. You're always doubling the amount he has until then, so it should be esren v'yarba. It should be a total of 24 wives. And the Gemara comments, Tanya Namiyachu, we have a brisa that supports this. It says, Lo yarba lo nashim, he can't have too many wives. Yoser me'esren v'yarba. It means to say, he can't have more than 24. And the Gemara continues, Laman de Darish Vav, according to the one who darshans the Vav, because it says Kohena Vichahena, so our boy Mushmona Hav, it's actually going to come out to a total of 48, because you're again going to double it, it's going to go from 24 to 48. And the Gemara comments, Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa like this as well, Lo Yarba Lo Nashim, he can't have too many wives, Yoser me our boy Mushmona, he can't have more than 48 wives. And the Gemara continues, Vitana Didan, but what about the Tan of our Mishnah, my time? What's his reason that he doesn't darshan that it should be 24 or 48? Why does he limit it to 18? Amar Rav Kahana says, Makish Kohena Basra le Kohena Kama, because we compare the second Kohena to the first Kohena, Ma Kohena Kama Shis, just like the first Kohena is 6, Af Kohena Basra Shis, so too, the last Kohena is also 6, so again it's 6 times 3, for a total of 18. But the Gemara continues, V'havoi Michal, how can you say that David HaMelech had only 6 wives? What about Michal? That should have been a 7th wife. Amar Rav says, Egla zu Michal. When it says Egla in the pasuk, that actually does refer to Michal. Michal was one of the 6. V'lama nikra shema Egla, why was she referred to as Egla? Shechaviva olav ka'egla, because she was beloved to him like a calf. V'cheinu omer, and likewise we find in the pasuk that the pasuk sometimes uses this metaphor for a wife. It says, Lule charashtem be'eglasi, had you not plowed with my calf. And the Gemara continues, Michal b'ni, but did Michal really have children? But isn't it written in the pasuk, Michal bashal lo hayol vlad ad yom Mos? It says that Michal did not have a child until the day that she died. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Chisda says, Ad yom Mosa lo hayol, until the day she died, she didn't have a child. But b'yom Mosa hayol, but on the day that she died, she did have a child. But the Gemara continues, Michti, let us see, Bonim hecha kachashiv lahu. These children that are being listed for David HaMelech, where is this happening? Bechevron, it's happening in Chevron. V'ilu ma'isa de Michal, where is the incident with Michal b'Yerushalayim? However, that took place in Yerushalayim. T'chsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, Michal bashol nishkafa b'yad hachalon. It says that Michal bashol, she was looking out the window, Vateres HaMelech David mefazez u'mecharke lefnei Hashem vativaz, and she saw David HaMelech was leaping and dancing in front of Hashem, and she despised him. V'yomer Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yosef, and some say Rav Yosef says, Shakalta Michal lemitrafsa, Michal took her punishment at that moment. And so the Gemara says, Ella Ema, rather say as follows, Araoso Maisa, until that incident, Hayala, she actually did have children. And when we say she didn't have children, it means Mikanva Elach lo Hayala. From that point on, she did not have children, that was her punishment, and so she really did have a child, and that was mentioned in that pasuk above. And the Gemara continues, Vaksib, but isn't it written, Vayikach David od pilagshim v'nashim b'Yerushalayim, that David took more pilagshim, concubines, and he took more nashim, he took more wives in Yerushalayim, so he did have more than 6. And the Gemara says, L'miluye shmona asr, that was in order to complete the 18. He did not take more than 18 wives. And the Gemara says, my nashmu, my pilagshim, what's the difference between wives and concubines? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, nashim b'chsuva uvikidushin. The wives, they have ksuba and they have kiddushin. Pilagshim below ksuba velo kiddushin. Pilagshim do not have ksuba and they do not have kiddushin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Arba Meos Yiladim Hayu Lo LeDavid. David HaMelech had 400 children. V'kulan B'nei Yefas Toar Hayu. And they were all children of Yefas Toar, beautiful women that were taken captive in war. Umegadle Blorios Hayu. And they had hairstyles like the Gentiles. V'kulan Yoshvin B'kronos Shalzav. And they all sat in golden wagons. Umahalchin B'rashay Gaisos Hayu. And they walked in the front of the troops. V'heim Hayu Balei Agrofen Shal Beis David. And they were the mighty ones of David HaMelech's household. V'yomer Rav Yehuda Marav, and Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Tamar Bas Yefas Toar Haisa, Tamar as well, she was the daughter of a Yefas Toar, a beautiful woman that was taken captive in war, and she had not converted, and therefore she was born to a Gentile woman. Shenemar, as it says, V'ata daber na el HaMelech ki lo yimneini mimeka, it says, speak to the king, because he will not prevent me from you. This is referring to the episode of Tamar and Amnon. And so the Gemara says, V'sal kadaitach bas nisuin havoi. Now if you're going to say that she was somebody who could have nisuin, that she was considered to be Jewish, so that would his sister be permitted to him? Of course, the king is not going to allow a brother to marry a sister. Rather, you see from here, Bas Yefas Toar Haisa, that really Tamar was the daughter of Yefas Toar, and again, she was born from a woman who had not converted. And the Gemara now continues and discusses the story of Amnon and Tamar. The pasuk says, Ula Amnon Reya Shmo Yonadav ben Shima Achi David, that Amnon had a friend, Yonadav, Ish Chacham, he was a wise person. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Ish Chacham Larisha, when it says he was a wise person, it means he was a wise person for the wicked. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Vayomer, he said, Madua takacha dal ben hamelech, why are you dejected, son of the king? Vayomer lo Yonadav, and Yonadav said to him, he gave advice to Amnon, Shechaval mishkavcha v'hischol, you should pretend you're ill, ad v'yasa la'inai asaberia, and then you're going to have her prepare food. And the pasuk then says, Vatika chamashris vatitzog lefanav, she took the pan, she poured before him. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, She'asa lo minei tigon, she made foods for him that were fried. Vayisna Amnon sinna gedola mode, and then the pasuk says that Amnon ended up hating Tamar. And the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason that he hated Tamar? Amar Rav Yitzchak says, Neimun nikshur lo v'asaso kros shifcha, there was a hair that was tied around his aver, and it severed it. But the Gemara says, V'chin nikshur lo ihi mayavda, but even if it got tied there, what did she do wrong? And so the Gemara says, Ella rather say, Kashra lo nema, she's the one that tied the hair, v'asaso kros shifcha, and she severed his aver in that fashion. But the Gemara continues, Ini, is this really possible? V'hadarash Rava, but didn't Rava darshan ma'idich siv? What does it mean when it's written in the pasuk, Vayetze lachshem bagoyim biyafyech, that there was a name among the nations of your beauty? It means she'ein lahen livnos Yisrael, that the daughters of Klal Yisrael, they don't have losar beis hashechi, they don't have hair by the armpits, v'lo beis ha'erva, they don't have pubic hair. And so how did she tie this hair? And the Gemara answers, Shani Tamar. Tamar was different. The Bas Yefas Toar Hava, because as we said, she was the daughter of a beautiful woman that was captured in war. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Vatikach Tamar Efer al Rosha, that Tamar, she put ashes on her head, Uchsonas hapasim asher lo kara, and the Chsonas hapasim that she was wearing, the colored garment, she tore it. And the Gemara says, Tana mishmeid Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, was taught in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, Geder Gadol Gadra Tamar ba'osa shah. Tamar, she put up a great fence, a great protection for other women at that time, by demonstrating what had happened to her. Because the women, they said to themselves, Livnos malachim kach, if such a thing can happen to the daughter of kings, so Livnos hadiotos, alachas kama v'kama, to the daughters of regular people, certainly such a thing can happen. And imlitz nuos kach, if such a thing can happen to a woman who's modest, leprutzos alachas kama v'kama, to women who are not modest, of course that can happen. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Ba'osa shah gazru, at that time they made a decree, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis.